But yeah. You can. No, they're gonna see everything.
No. Okay, that's how you do it. See? There's no screen.
Okay. Good. Okay, so please join me in welcoming Amy to our user group.
Hi, everyone. Robert actually didn't mention that you will be getting continuing education units for the GBCI. So if you guys have enrolled in the CMP, this counts towards 1.5 hours, and we have gotten that approved. So you can sign in. There'll be a sheet going around, I guess, for that, and just put your GBCI number next to that. Otherwise, you can self-report. We'll provide a link to, I guess, the Meetup website after this, and you can go on that, click the link. I think you have to fill out a survey, and then you can self-report, but it's worth 1.5 credit hours. So let me just get out of here.
Let me just turn down the lights.
Okay. Yeah. Let me get to here. All right. All right, so tonight we're going to look at how to complete LEED certification of a project using BIM. We're going to primarily be focusing on Revit, but during the course of this you're going to see the need to use other tools, additional programs, in order to complete all of the documentation. It's not advancing. Okay. All right. So my name is Amy Patel. I work at HOK. I'm a member of the BuildingSMART group there. I've been in the AEC industry for about 11 years now, working on numerous projects in various scales. I've been working mostly in the Revit platform since around 2005, and I've been LEED accredited since 2004. And a few of the projects that I've worked on are up on the screen right now. I managed the Revit models on pretty much all of these projects, and the LEED certification on some of these projects as well. I've also taught Revit, Sustainable Strategies, and Graphics at the University of California, Berkeley campus and at NYU. And then my Twitter handle's on the screen on the bottom there. You're welcome to follow me, although I don't really tweet much about work, but maybe I will. I don't know. And also the other day, somebody did tell me that my tweets were inappropriate and would come back to haunt me, Robert. So if you want to read some inappropriate tweets, follow me. Also, one more thing about me, I do have a tendency to talk really, really fast sometimes, so I'm going to make an effort to slow down, but if during the course of this I ever, talk super fast, just yell back and tell me to slow down, that I'm going too fast. So, all right, so tonight we're going to focus on a couple of things. First, the LEED certification process, and then we'll go into how to harness the power of Revit, mostly templates and some custom content in order to generate the information that is specifically required by the USGBC, and also how we can use templates to kind of aid in the repeatability of this whole process so you can do it on multiple projects. We'll look at some of the limitations of Revit and when it's necessary that you'll need to use an additional platform to complete some of the required documentation. And then at the end I'll just go through some examples of how you can apply this on a few credits. All right, so I said about doing this because on a lot of projects that I've worked on, it seems that monitoring the sustainable efforts on a project and then the design and documentation for a project is seen as two separate processes, and they're pretty much done independently. And so a lot of the reason for that is because there's this mentality that, you can't do that in Revit, right? It's not capable, and, somebody who works on the LEED effort almost, they're working independently, and it's really hard for them to stay current of any of the changes. So I think it's really important to weave these two threads together so that they're done simultaneously and from the same data set, right? But on the other hand, you have this misconception that, this isn't advancing, that of course you can do that in Revit. You can do anything in Revit. Just press the button and there you go. What's the problem, right? It's all done for you. So what I'm trying to say is both of these are somewhat true. You can use Revit to calculate and document the credit requirements that LEED requires, but it will take some customization and some initial setup right from the get-go. So this is our agenda for tonight. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at LEED and the current rating systems. I'll outline the process for certifying a project and then the online submittal process. And then I'm going to break down the credit requirements to those that can actually be calculated using some form of BIM technology. And then with Revit, we'll look at the customization using templates and some content. And then I'm going to share some settings that you can use in Revit to help you visualize the data that's actually being calculated. With the template files, there's really two ways of working with them, and they vary depending on the size of the project and how the team is organized. And then at times, you're going to have to transfer information to other platforms in order to calculate or optimize or simulate and analyze the performance of your design. So I'm going to get into why and when you're going to need to do that. And then I'll also talk about the two main, I guess we'll call them information infrastructures that you can use in order to transfer data from Revit into a tool that allows for energy analysis. So the GBXML and IFC file formats. And then at the end, I'm just going to show some examples of a few credits from each of these categories, well, one from each of these categories, to illustrate this whole process, and hopefully that will tie it all together. So let's start with LEED. Before I go any further, how many people in the audience are LEED AP? It's pretty good. It's about a third of the room. I'm not going to belabor LEED and talk about the virtues and limitations of LEED. I feel like if you're here and you're interested in this, then you or your firm have already bought into this process and are going forward using LEED to validate the sustainable performance metrics of your design. But for those of you that are not LEED APs and that are not familiar with this process, I'm just going to take a little bit of time just to go through the rating system, the certification process, and we'll look at what the submittals are. And then I'll break down the credits under the new construction rating system, which is what we're going to focus on for this process. All right, so these are the current rating systems under the LEED umbrella. The prerequisites and credits that are within them. So each one of these rating systems has a series of prerequisites and credits within them that are tailored based on the project usage and the type, right? So it's up to the team to decide what rating system that you're going to register your project under. And then the aim is to make sure that you meet all of the prerequisites and achieve as many of the credits possible for certification. So for this method, we're going to focus really on the new construction and major renovations rating system, the one up on the upper left. And I chose that one because it seems to be the most broadly used method, especially in our office. And before I go any further with this, this is LEED 2009, and this whole thing is tailored to LEED 2009. But starting, I think, the first or second quarter of next year, of 2013, a new rating system's coming out, LEED 2012. And I know the credits are undergoing some change, and if you're interested in that, it's all up on the USGBC website, and you can see what the changes are to each of the credits. And I think it's going up for balloting starting soon. But because the credits are so specific for what they ask for, a lot of the calculations are going to have to be revised from this version of 2009 to the next version of 2012. Okay, so when you certify a project, the first thing you're going to want to do is a feasibility study. Right? You'll go through the scorecard, you'll decide on a preliminary rating, and then you're going to assign responsibilities to all the team members. I personally would advise you to achieve as many credits as possible, as early on as possible, right? So this gives you some time to actually meet all of the requirements that you need to meet, and you can submit alternatives in case the review committee, denies some of your credits. Registering your project gives you access to the online system, and the online system is essentially a dashboard, and that houses all of your submittal forms, the status of your project, the timeline. And the good thing about the dashboard is that everyone on the team can access it at any time, and they can see the progress of what's going on. There are CIRs, credit interpretation rulings, and really what those are, they're there to give you guidance. So if you have a question while you're looking at all the credits that you're submitting, whether it's technical or anything else, you can submit a CIR. You can also access other CIRs, so that may help you out with any of the questions that you may have. They are kind of expensive. I think it's like $200 per CIR. And then once you have a good deal of data together, you can start applying for each credit. And when you apply for each credit, each one has a dynamic PDF form that's filled out directly on that dashboard. So and all supporting information, God bless you, can be uploaded via these forms as well. I'm going to show you an example of what one of those submittal forms looks like. You're allowed to submit credits for approval early on. Some of the credits you're submitting during design phase, some of them you're submitting towards the construction phase, but you can submit credits as you go along. However, when you are doing this, I would suggest you bundle up your credits, so submit like 15 at a time. Don't submit one or at a time. I found that the process goes a lot more smoothly and you get feedback and answers much more quickly if you're submitting them in bundles. So then there's project review, and it's done by a third party, the GBCI, the Green Building Certification Institute, and they'll give you feedback, and they'll provide rulings for all your credits, right? So whether or not it was anticipated, or like if they'll assign a status of they're anticipating the credit, they want you to clarify, submit some more information, it's achieved or it's denied. And then once you have that information, you can submit an appeal for a credit or a prerequisite if that's been denied, and then resubmit any information that's necessary. And then the last step is pretty much you're awarded your certification. And if, they've deemed that everything is copacetic and you have all your requirements filled out, and then you get a level of certification based on the number of points that you've achieved out of a possible 110, right, from certified to platinum. And then if you would like, you can purchase a plaque. All right, so this is what the actual submittal form looks like. This is just one example, and this is literally directly on that dashboard. And since these are dynamic, you can pretty much choose the option you're going for if a credit has an option. And then the body of the actual form will change based on what the requirements are. And then the calculators are actually built into these forms, so when you input data, the values are going to be computed automatically for you. And then down here you can see upload. I can't move the mouse, but you can upload any supporting information directly from here. So going back to the new construction major renovations rating system, these are the credits that are required under LEED 2009. And they're divided into 6 categories, and each credit is assigned a number of points. And so we went through each of these credits and their requirements and identified which credits can be calculated using Revit or Revit and some additional tool. And those are the ones that are shown in orange and green. So of the 65 credits that are possible, about 2/3 of them can be calculated using this method, which is a pretty good thing, that many credits you can actually pull information directly out of your design model. There are about 1/3 of the credits that don't require, that you can't really do this on, but some of them don't even require any calculations or any supporting data. Some of them are forms that need to be completed or a plan of action, and one of them is like an occupant survey. Okay, so let's talk about Revit. I don't know what the level of Revit users in this group are, so if some of this is extremely, I don't know, if it's pedantic, my apologies. I'm just trying to cover my bases with a wide range of the audience that we have. So within Revit, I'm going to take some time just to look at how we can leverage the model information so we can calculate and document what's required, right? So if we use the data that's in the model, we can stay on top of any of the changes. And since strategies, it's really good to kind of consider them early on in the life of a project. It's perfect to get the information out of that live model at the earliest stages possible. So what I'm really going to focus on within Revit are the features that you're going to use to extract the information directly from the model, right? So it's mainly going to be templates and schedules and some custom content. And then I'll just show you some filters and color fill schemes that you can use to help you visualize the data. So with templates, templates are really the heart of this whole process, right? And template, it's like any other software out there that has a template. It's just a standardized file that kind of serves as an example on which you base other files from, right? So all that information is built into a template file, and it relieves a lot of repetition of work. Some of the items that you'll include in this LEED template in the Revit are shared parameters, schedules, families, sheets and views, view templates, filters, color schemes. And I'm not going to go into each one, but I will spend some time on the parameters and schedules, and then we'll look at filters and color schemes. So shared parameter, is everyone here familiar with what a shared parameter is and what it does? Okay. I'll talk about what a shared parameter is and why you'll need it, but I'm not going to show you how to create a shared parameter. You can always pick up the latest edition of Mastering Autodesk Revit Architecture if you want to learn how to do that. So what a shared parameter is, it's really an identifier, right? And it can be managed across multiple projects and families and template files. What it does is it allows Revit to know that you're talking about the same piece of information in the context of multiple files and families, right? So this one, that shared parameter with the same name can live in many families and many projects. So it can live in, families, it can live in projects, it can be scheduled, and the key to the shared parameter is that it can be tagged, right? Because if it can't be tagged, then it's pretty much just a project parameter. So really, for this effort, you're going to need to create a series of shared parameters that you can push into different families and different projects. And they can be instance or type depending on what you're trying to track. So the other thing you're going to really need to do is create a series of schedules. And with schedules, the first one I suggest that you create is the scorecard version of the credits. Usually on most projects this is kept in Excel, but I think it's really helpful to have this in Revit in order for everyone on the team to be able to see and then adjust what the credits are being sought after are without having to then defer back to that Excel file, right? So if you look at the LEED credit parameter, it's a shared parameter with a yes/no value, and then the achieved points column is a calculated value that's based off of a simple conditional statement that just says, if LEED credit is checked, then give me the possible points value, otherwise give me 0. All right? So what it does is it's going to allow you to calculate the totals that the team is actually aiming to achieve. So you see, out of a possible 110 points on this project, 74 of them are going out, are trying to be achieved. And then you're going to want to basically create a schedule for each of the credits that you're going to use, and then tailor that to what the requirements call for using shared parameters and calculated values. So here's an example. It might be hard for you guys to read, but schedules in Revit can be pretty powerful, but they can also be kind of limiting in kind of the data that's presented and how it's presented. So like I showed you earlier, you can create shared parameters and you can do some calculated values, but you can't cross-reference data between schedules, from one schedule to another. You can't do a calculated value on multiple parameters that are associated with different schedules or even across linked files. And you can do some conditional formatting, but it's somewhat limited. And you're going to find that you're going to run into a wall with some of the LEED requirements. So as an example here, we created a series of shared parameters to report out the orientation of exterior wall panels. So here's a problem. The Revit wall doesn't recognize orientation, right? So in order to designate the orientation, whether it was north, south, east, west, we had to write this conditional statement that gives us the solar orientation of the walls. And we needed to do this in order to tie this into a utility that we made using Grasshopper, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. And basically the analysis that was reported from Grasshopper gave us the optimum shading percentage for daylight and views based on the orientation. So we needed to create this in order to push that information back into Revit. All right. For visualization, you have the ability to visualize data in schedules and views, but you can also apply filters to elements and then that are being counted towards LEED credits. And so as you can see, when you apply these filters, the elements will change their color based on the values and that are modified for the parameters. So I think this is really important to visually see what's being accounted for. So when changes and substitutions are being made, these views serve to tell you what the effect of your changes are going to be. Obviously the schedule is going to report the change, but I think a visual check is really helpful just to see what the changes are and also where they're occurring, right? So, and this is really especially important when you're working on a large team and there's a lot of people on the project. So what we're looking at here are, it's basically a view of furniture that's going towards different material and resources credits. So the items are color-coded based on what LEED credit that they apply to. And you can set up different views based on individual credits and then keep them all in the model for reference.
Amy, are you taking questions at the end?
Yeah, you can interrupt me if you have a question now. I don't mind.
Curious if the Grasshopper Revit link, are you doing it through like a shared spreadsheet or are you using like a VB node in Grasshopper?
I'm going to show you that, and we have a couple of different things. Yes, I'm sorry.
Questions on the chat.
Oh yeah, sorry. I don't know where the mouse, the little cursor went. I can't find the cursor on this thing. Oh, no wonder. Here we go. No questions.
Nothing?
Nope. Something else that we're doing for visualizing things are colorful schemes, right? So we can designate spaces that are being counted towards the credits. So this is a floor plan that's showing the color fill, designating any occupied spaces that are receiving natural daylight. So for LEED, under this rating system, you need to have 75% of all of your regularly occupied spaces receiving daylight in order to achieve this credit. So in this case, it serves as a visual check, but this view can actually be used as your supporting documentation for submittal. So you just need to print this out to like a PDF or something and then upload it to the system. So some of the methods. So depending on the scale of your project and then the size of the Revit files that are associated with it, there are two really main ways you can use the template files. The first one is to link the project Revit files to the LEED Revit file, right? So you're going to start by creating a Revit file from that template file that you made, and then link all the main model files into it, and all the content, the sheets, the families, schedules are going to be available to you this way. And then usually on large projects, there's a team member that's working towards LEED efforts, and that person can just stay in that LEED Revit project file, right? So this really works well when you have a large project with multiple team members or multiple files, and then you have one person that can work independently in that LEED file. But the one caveat to this whole thing is that some linked elements don't really transfer that well. There are certain limitations, and not all the information is going to be completely accessible in your LEED file from the models that are linked into it. But the benefit of this is that you can access all the information that lives across multiple files and pull it into one file, and you don't weigh down your architectural design project files with all this LEED information. So,
How much information is it? Is it like 100 megabytes of information, or is it just?
No, it's not. It's not that. It's a template file, but it has like a schedule for every credit that you're seeking. So that's some information. There's a lot of custom families that you have to create, so there's some information there. I have views completely set up already that are ready to go. So when you bring in a project into it, the views are already there, and the information kind of fills in.
I guess maybe one less person working on the geometry model and slowing down that part of it.
Right, and then like let's say you have a large project and you have 5 or so Revit models. You're not pushing that information into all of the different design models. Instead you're doing the other way, where you're pulling the information from the design models into the LEED Revit file, right? But now this is the other way of working. So if you're working on more of a smaller project, you can insert all of the schedules and the views and the sheets, and you can load families, and you can transfer project standards from that LEED template file into your project file, right? And this works best if you're working on a small project and you have one model and everyone on the team is pretty much working that model. In that case, there's no point in having to create a separate model and linking that information in, right? The downside of this method is that it does add some weight to your project. So, what I would do is just only add the content and information for what the credits that you're actually applying for or trying to achieve one at a time as you're doing it. I wouldn't dump everything into your architectural design model. Pull it in selectively as you go along. The benefit of doing it this way is that all the information that you're trying to calculate is readily available, and then when adjustments are made, you don't have to reload latest and save to central to manage any of the changes. It's all pretty much right there. You just have to go to that schedule or go to that view. Okay, we're gonna leave Revit for a little while, because when you're doing these calculations, you're gonna realize that at some point you're going to need to go outside of Revit in order to complete the documentation. This is really true for a lot of the credits that require a great deal of calculation, so mostly the water efficiency credits and the material and resource credits. And then as far as optimizing, there are a lot of tools out there that help you look at multiple options to generate alternatives to optimize or analyze the performance of your design in a way that Revit really just can't do. And then energy modeling. Energy modeling is a huge process, part of the LEED certification process. And I don't know if there's any engineers in the room. I'm not going to really go into energy modeling and how it's generated just because of time, but I am going to focus on how you're exporting data out of your Revit model into other platforms, right? And there's really two main file transfer formats that we're going to look at, the GBXML and the IFC. IFC, Industry Foundation Classes. I'll get to that. So, I said this earlier, but Revit schedules can only go so far with calculations. So there are going to be times where you need to export your schedules to Excel to do really some of the heavy lifting with calculations that may be too cumbersome for Revit to handle. And like I said, for pretty much every water efficiency credit, you're going to need to do this, and then most of the material resources credits that require any sort of accounting, like the resource reuse, the recycled content, rapidly renewable materials. And then you can use something like BIM link, which I'm showing up here, or you can just simply export a file from Revit and directly and then link that to Excel. The benefits of BIM link are that you can format the export somewhat, but more importantly, you can push that information back into the Revit model from your adjusted Excel file. And you can also create an API to do this if you have that, but not everyone has that as a resource. So if you don't, you can do it this way.
If you don't mind me interjecting, for information, BIM link is a Revit add-on created by
Ideate.
The reseller Ideate. They're out on the west coast, Portland and San Francisco. I think one of those two cities, their headquarters. So they have a number of add-ons. BIM link is one of them, and it helps you round trip information in and out of Revit into spreadsheets as a database. It's very helpful for all sorts of tasks, in addition to what Amy is showing here.
Yeah.
Have you also tried the access link, the Revit access or database access link?
No. The DB link.
I know that HOK uses a different version of the database management program.
Right.
But essentially all of these schedules and every other possible item that can be scheduled is actually built as an access database when you hit the RDB button. So in a lot of ways, you could actually, potentially manage the same information there. I was just curious if you tried that or not.
No. I have not personally. Not advancing. Hold on, sorry. All right, so since Excel's such a powerful calculator, what we did is we created these Excel template files, right? Similar to the Revit template file, you're going to have Excel template files that are going to contain all the formulas that you're going to need in order to complete these calculations. And we formatted them similarly to the dynamic PDF forms that live on that dashboard. This helps us save a ton of time, getting all that information together. And then within Excel, you can lock certain cells, you can lock the data, so you can help kind of mitigate user error so somebody doesn't go in there and delete a row and then wonder why it doesn't work anymore. So another thing that we're using Excel for is to study the climate at the project site. Now, I put this in here. It doesn't directly relate to the documentation that's required for the credits, but I think it's helpful to understand what the climatic conditions at a project site are for the building that you're designing. This indirectly relates to the energy and atmosphere credits that ask for an energy model, right, for building performance. And then there's also a credit that looks at thermal comfort. So it indirectly relates to that. You're not going to get the specific data that you need for those credits, but I think it's really helpful to understand this. So what we are doing here is we're extracting data from the weather files, and we're using pivot tables and pivot charts within Excel to graph temperatures, precipitation, humidity, cloud coverage, prevailing winds, directions, and velocities. And the point really is to better understand what the conditions at the site are and then identify some strategies early on, right? Because, it's not really wise to wait for an energy model to know if your design is prudent, right? for that climate zone. Most times energy models aren't really done until DD or until your design has progressed to a certain stage where at that point it's too late to make any major changes. And you can get this information from Ecotech and Climate Consultant, but we do this for really two reasons. One, we want to be able to tailor what these graphs look like, right? So we can actually overlay information on top of each other, and we can designate what we want to see. And the other reason that we do this is that we have access to the back end in a sense. So if some of the output doesn't make sense to us, we can actually go back and look at the raw weather file, and we can look at our pivot charts to see what the input data looks like, to really understand better what the output is. With Climate Consultant or with Ecotech, you really don't have access to any of that information. You just pretty much have to take their word for it. So here's there are a few different tools that you can look at. So you can look at multiple options in order to optimize your design. So here we're using Rhino with the Grasshopper plugin to analyze some of the best locations and dimensions for exterior shading devices. And then we're also using Galapagos, which is an evolutionary solver, which uses a genetic algorithm to then help give you the optimal results for the design, based on your project's location and orientation. We're then taking that information and we can push it back into the Revit shading families in our Revit model. And since these are type-based, we can then propagate the changes or the results from the Grasshopper study across the entire facade almost instantaneously. This is really useful for the indoor environmental quality credits, 8.1, 8.2, that look at daylighting and views. I'm going to show you actually a video example of how all this works. Okay, so energy modeling. Since so much of the data that you need to support the analysis is captured as the design is proceeding, we're looking at how the building will perform at the earliest stages of the design. And we can look at alternatives pretty quickly, and we can then optimize the building's performance. So energy and atmosphere prerequisite 2 requires an energy model in order to meet minimum performance standards. And then the credit 1 for energy and atmosphere actually looks at optimizing it for even further reductions. So what I'm showing here is that you have your metrics of the building, and you'll run energy models at various times throughout the life of the project. And during that, you're going to verify your benchmarks to ensure that you're working towards your targets and your goals. This topic can be a completely different presentation altogether because there's a lot to cover for it. But for the purposes of this presentation, I really just want to talk about how you get your data from Revit to be able to be useful for energy models. So we'll talk about GBXML and IFC because I think that those are the two most prevalent information infrastructures for data exchange from Revit into a program that actually can do energy models. So GBXML, it was originally developed in 1999. It stands for Green Building Extensive Markup Language, and it really acts as a conduit among analysis tools. There's a long list of programs that will accept GBXML for running energy models, and some of them are the Autodesk, Green Building Studio, Revit, Ecotech, Bentley, Energy 10, some of the DOE tools, Energy Plus, Open Studio. Anyway, if you go to gbxml.org, there's a huge list of tools that will actually accept GBXML. When you're working with GBXML, the way I recommend that you probably should plan on working if you're going to use GBXML when you export your data is to keep a parallel analysis model with your design model, right? I know this adds extra effort, especially to stay on top of any of the changes, but, and I guess you could argue that, you could keep the elements on a separate work set instead of having to keep them in a separate model. But I really believe that it's really important to have a self-contained model that exports cleanly for analysis rather than relying on adjusting views or, to make sure that you get a clean export. Plus, I think it weighs down the model considerably to keep all that information in the design model. It really doesn't solve the problem of doubling your effort. And the reason that I recommend this method is because the GBXML schema is only going to recognize certain elements, namely system families, so floors, walls, and roofs, and rooms and spaces. So if you have overhangs in your model and you created them using a generic model family, they're not going to export when you pull these out because the schema just doesn't recognize it. So you have to model them as a floor or a roof. And it also looks at adjacencies differently, so not as parameter designations. It looks at it as to whether a room is interior or exterior based on what it's adjacent to. It has no way to recognize materials that are attached to the surface. So, I mean, again, I know you can create APIs to solve all of this, but if you're not customizing it and you're using what's standard within Revit, you're going to need to use only system families. And then also for the analysis model, a good rule of thumb is just to keep your geometry as simple as possible, and that's really one of the other reasons that I suggest you create a separate model that will then go to the export and then be handed off to an engineer or someone who's going to be doing the energy model. Excuse me.
That separate model, that is an effort that somebody has to maintain to match the form of the design. Right?
Yeah, it has to stay current.
The designer's changing the form of the building, the energy model, the simple energy mass of spaces, that has to be updated manually. Right?
Yeah, it has to stay current, not just with the form, but where the openings are, where the glazing is, everything. It has to, you have to kind of keep it current. But
it's easier to do separately, manually update versus connected within Revit to.
It's easier in the long run, right? Because it's a clean export.
What are the primary elements? Rooms, floors, walls?
Walls, floors, roofs, openings, and room space information. Those are pretty much all you'll need to export. You know, but it does, with the room and space and zone, it does export information such as occupancy, right, like the number of people, heating load from equipment, and lighting information. It does do that. And there is an effort to extend the schema. If you go to the gbxml.org website, there is a list of all the things that they're trying to do in order to expand it. Yes.
So you suggest to duplicate it at certain milestones of the project, or in
Oh, go back.
to copy it early on where the models are being done?
You would want to keep it as up to date as possible for when you're going to export to GBXML for when you're going to be running an energy model on it.
No way to use massing as a way to represent this.
Well, you would use massing, but then you have to associate walls, floors, and roofs to the mass element. Right?
One more question over here.
Oh, sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry? Curtain walls are not well supported at all. No, the open, like you can see that you wouldn't want to show any mullions or anything like that. You can just show it as one kind of clear wall, like a wall, but change it to a clear property. Yeah. There are also model checkers, right, that will verify the health of the data that you've exported that you're going to be using to analyze. And I think this is really critical because I think if the data going in is faulty, then the results of your analysis are going to be faulty as well. It's just inevitable. And there's no sense in wasting time running an analysis on faulty data. And that's why I suggest you have a separate model, just to have a clean export, right? Because if you're exporting out junk or things that are not going to be translated with the schema, then your analysis results are just going to be faulty. When you export out of Revit, when you export GBXML out of Revit, Revit does have a check with that export, which is pretty good. This is kind of, this is the IES check. And when you import into IES, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that software, Integrated Environmental Solutions, it also has a model checker during import. So it's pretty good because you're running a check when you're exporting out of Revit, and then you're running another check when you're importing it into the tool that you're running the energy model on. And then in addition to this, there are some free GBXML model viewers out there. You know, if you do a Google search, you'll find a few. But, you know, they're free, and, you know, you get what you pay for. So I just be careful with things that you get for free, especially if they're from an unknown source. I don't know if I would trust it completely to make sure that my model is super healthy. And the IFC, IFC also is a platform for information sharing. However, in contrast to GBXML, there are only a few tools that currently allow for the IFC file format for generating energy models. Right? So this is most likely changing because We know this within buildingSMART that the performance energy definitions are currently being written and revised. So as that changes, hopefully more software developers will start incorporating the IFC and pick that up. But some of the tools that currently accept the IFC, Autodesk Revit does export IFC, and Ecotech actually does import IFCs. There's Ryuska, which uses the DO2 engine, and it does comfort and energy simulation. The Energy Plus tools and LBNL, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, some of the tools that they have available also support the IFC.
Hey, we have a question. The IFC file format, you export your data, so you're actually getting geometry plus parameters about the geometry.
Yep, I'm getting, yep.
Sorry,
No, it's okay. I'm just going to.
GBXML is just the data about the geometry, not the geometry, correct?
The GBXML, yeah. What kind of Robert just kind of said is that the IFC exports all of your data from your model, right? So the GBXML is doing like a selective export of just certain elements that it's going to recognize, but the IFC is going to take everything. So if you're going to use IFC as your main file transfer medium, then you don't really need to create a separate design model, right? You basically don't even need to simplify the geometry or create a parallel model when you do this. However, you're not going to want to run an energy. Oh, I will say this: you can, create 3D views in your Revit model to export just that data out into the IFC, and then you can check the little box that says export, selectively export data. But if you want rooms to export, which you always will, you have to dump everything out. And you're not going to want to run an energy model with everything in it, right? So what you can do and what exists are IFC editors. And what they do is allow you to include or exclude data for energy models. And then what's on the screen here is this tool called Simple BIM. And it's something that we've tested out, and we think it works pretty well. But you can selectively pick and choose what you want to take into your platform for energy analysis. Well, really the main takeaway from all of this, I know this kind of deviates a little bit from the LEED, but I think it's important to understand how you're going to be sharing information, especially with the engineers, right from the beginning, and then plan for that accordingly. It's going to alleviate a lot of headaches down the road. Knowing what software is going to be used and the file transfer medium, knowing that early on and then accounting for it is extremely important. One, so that you don't lose a lot of time trying to catch up, and two, that you're ensuring the fidelity of the data that's being transferred. All right, so back to Revit and LEED. I'm going to show 3 examples, and the first one is going to look at, it's from the Sustainable Sites category, and it's the Heat Island Effect Roof Credit, and it's really taking information directly from Revit. You're getting everything you need from Revit, and then you can push that right up to LEED Online. The second credit is from the water efficiency category, and it's the water use reduction credits. And in that one, I'm going to show you how you're getting information out of your Revit model, putting that into Excel, processing it in Excel, and then getting the information to submit to the online system. And then the last one is the indoor environmental quality, and it's the credits that speak to daylighting and views. And so I'll show you the Rhino, with Grasshopper and Galapagos plugins, and then how we take that information and push that into Revit. And then once it's in Revit, there is some other things that you'll need to do. I'm not going to go too involved in that, but I wanted to show you how you get that into Revit and why you do that, and then you can get your information to submit to the online system. Okay, so this is the first credit. And really what the purpose of this credit is to reduce the heat island effect through the use of roofing materials with SRI values that comply with the following 2 statements. The SRI value is a solar reflective index, right? It's a measure of the roof's ability to reflect solar heat. That information, it's a value, it's a number usually from somewhere between like 20 to maybe 100, or maybe it's 0 to 100, I don't know, I've never seen a 0 SRI. But anyway, that information is going to be available to you from the manufacturer, and that information applies to the entire roof assembly, not just the actual surface. So really what this credit requires is that if the pitch of the roof is greater than 2/12, then it's considered a steep roof. I'll just look at it on my screen. And the SRI value must be 29 or higher for 75% of the total roof area, right? But if the pitch of the roof is less than or equal to 2/12, then the roof is a low slope roof, and the SRI value must be 78 or higher for 75% of the total roof. So it's a calculation. And the submittal for this with the online system is really just a roof plan, which you can easily get out of Revit, and which highlights the materials and any vegetated area, which is just tags, and then a list of the roofing products along with any of their properties. So let's do this. So I have a video. Hope this plays.
Isn't that under shadow too? The shadow of
No, it's looking at the solar reflective index of the actual properties of the roof assembly, not any shading. The non-roof credit does look at shading, but that's looking at the ground plane. This is looking at the roofs. Let's see. Is it playing? Okay. So, I might have to stop this. Did it? Oh, sorry. Try it again. So what you're going to want to do in your Revit model is you want to create 3D views that show only the roofs on the project. I'm going to have to look over here kind of to talk to you guys. So in the instance properties, you'll select the roof, and in the instance properties, you're going to indicate whether or not the roof is steep, right? This is a yes-no parameter that goes back to that 212 rule. So in our case, in this example, all the roofs are pretty much a low-slope roof, so none of the roofs are going to be marked as steep. And then in the type properties for each of the roof, you're going to type in the SRI value. Again, that's given to you by the manufacturer, and it's based on the total roof assembly.
Amy,
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I don't know if I can stop this. Every time I stop it, it goes to the beginning.
pause in the lower left corner.
I know, but I did that last time and it went to the beginning. Yeah, see, it goes back to the beginning. Let me just get through the whole video and then you can, how about that? All right, I have to start it from the beginning. So again, it's picking whether or not the roof is steep based off of that shared parameter. Just a yes, no, and then you're going to go, well, you'll do that for all the roofs because they're instance, so you have to select each roof and do it for that. You go to the type properties and then type in the SRI value, which is another shared parameter that you'll create, but that'll be type-based. Okay, so once you do that, then you can insert the schedule from that template that you created, right? And so when you do that, that'll bring the schedule, and the schedule is going to automatically populate with all the roof elements in your project, right? Along with the areas of each, whether or not the roof is steep, and the SRI columns, those are going to populate based on the inputs that you put in. And the total percentage of roof is the area of each roof divided by the total area. And then the SRI count is based on a conditional format that states, back to that little statement in the beginning that states, if the roof is not steep and the SRI is 78 or greater, or if the roof is steep and the SRI is 29 or higher, then show me the total percentage. If neither is the case, then show me 0, right? So, see that? So in order to satisfy this credit, we have to have 75% of the roof comply with the requirements. So in this case, I don't know if you can see that, but we fall short at just like 74%. So at this point, we have a few choices to make. We can either redesign some of the roofs and make them steep, right, because we only need an SRI of 29 or higher for steep slope roofs. But, you know, in most cases, redesigning the roof really isn't an option. So alternative, what you can do is you can change the material, right? So I don't know where the video is, but you can change some of the material. So if you look at the bottom, I thought I zoomed in, but if you look at the bottom, it's a metal roof that's painted gray. But if you look at some of the information from the manufacturer, if that roof was painted white, you can have a higher SRI value. So if you create a new roof, if you get an okay from the designer and say, okay, instead of the gray roof, let's make it a white roof, you can then change the SRI value to 85. It's just a roof schedule.
Now, basically that means that it's taking into account no model objects that are on your roof but are not the roof category. Namely, if you were to, you know, I mean, there are other objects that sometimes live on a roof, like benches, mechanical walls, steel.
Right, but this is looking at the assembly of the roof, not all of the, I guess, accoutrements that are on the roof, right? So it's the actual roof assembly. So yeah, you can have mechanical equipment, you can have other things on the roof, but really what this credit is saying that 75% of the roof assembly has to achieve this, right? So areas with mechanical pads are on, yes, yes.
Maybe this, but where is the calculation? Is it in a formula?
Yeah, so basically in the schedule, if I can go to that point here, I don't know, let's see if this will let me. I didn't open it up, but it's a calculated value. It's not letting me do that unless I play the whole video again. But it's a calculated value, and it's in that, what was it called? Here, I'll go back to, because I forgot what the parameter is called.
Will all the shared parameters, when they work with system cameras, do like roofs?
Roof is a system family.
I know, but the shared parameter work, is scheduling valuable, the schedulable field within the system family?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
You can put a shared parameter that almost any model object in the model.
Right, yeah, yeah. I'll have to play the video all over again. I can't seem to advance it either through this thing. But I'm not going to be able to pause it either, so I'm going to have to catch it really fast and explain it.
When you press pause,
It goes back to the beginning.
Okay, don't worry about it then.
Because it's not playing on my computer. It's only playing on that one. Do you know what I'm saying?
I was just wondering if it was in the
It's a calculated value.
schedule.
Yeah, yeah. So
And it's looking at the pitch that the roof is.
right. So basically, when it gets to the schedule, I'm sure I can't walk over there to point, but because of the microphone.
What happens when one piece of roof has multiple slopes?
You're going to model it as different roofs then, right?
You have to model that as different roofs?
Well, you're saying if one roof is like that, then you would model it as different roofs. Just for this purpose, you'd have to model it as different roofs because you'd have to associate one as a steep roof and one as a non-steep roof. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Okay. So you see ooh, I can't see it and I can't walk over because of the microphone. But all right. So basically, this is your area. This is your yes, no. This is your SI that you input. Percentage pulling is just a formula that's pulling that percentage of the roof area over the total percentage of roofs. And your SRI count, that's your conditional statement. That's your calculated value of the conditional statement in it. If that was the conditional statement that was up on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next credit. Okay. So the water use reduction credit, this one is seeking to reduce water usage by a baseline by using high efficiency fixtures. So the prerequisite one, which you have to do, is you have to reduce the water usage of your building by 20% off of the baseline case. And then you get extra points with credit 3 if you can provide further reductions by 30 to 40%. And really what you want to submit for this are cut sheets and the calculated values. So really nothing out of Revit is going to be submitted, but you're going to need to do all the calculations, and you're going to have the cut sheets, which you can just get from the manufacturer. This is looking at high efficiency plumbing fixtures. So you'll need those cut sheets and then the calculations. So let's do this again. All right, so for each of the high-performing plumbing fixtures in your model, you're going to indicate what fixture user groups belongs to, and that's another shared parameter that you'll need to create. Fixture use groups, and this is in the reference guide, in the LEED reference guides, there's subsets of facilities that are used by different occupants. They're not the actual count of fixtures, but but the definition of that is in the reference guide. So, is it playing? It is.
Something was flashing and then stopped.
Oh. It's playing. Yeah. Okay, there you go. All right, so once you've assigned all the use groups, you're going to insert the schedule from that template file that you created, right? So you go and insert that. And then there's your schedule, and any of the fixtures that you've assigned a use group to are going to populate in the schedule. And then you're going to take this information and you're going to move it over or export it out into Excel to plug it into this. This is our LEED water efficiency template, and we formatted this template. So some of the values contain, cells contain some values. Some of them are referenced from another worksheet, and some of them are weighting or calculations. And so there's a key up over there on the upper right that kind of shows you where you're going to need to put some inputs in. So from that Revit schedule, you're going to get the fixture ID, the family, and the type. And you can just bring that in. You can get external data. It's a command within Revit that will pull that information in from the file that you exported. Or again, you can have an API. So bring that in. And then on the bottom, you can't really see it, but there's another worksheet called the Input tab. And in that tab, you're going to really enter the occupant information. You have to enter in your male, female, occupants, full-time and transient, and the building operation days. And that's really important because that information is going to get pulled in for the calculations. And then at the bottom here, you have your baseline values, and those are pretty much referenced right from the LEED reference guide. And then you're going to have your design case values, which you're going to get from the manufacturers. There are a lot of Revit families out there. Toto, Kohler, they all provide Revit families, and I've checked some of them. The flush and flow rates are actually in the families, which is kind of good. So then you go back into this credit tab, and then you can see that the calculations are automatically done because the formulas have already been kind of baked in there, so the calculations are computed. And then based on any occupant information for the fixture use groups, we can see what the percent reductions are. So for this, the percentage of black water reduction and gray water reduction are shown. And down there, you can kind of see that for these inputs for this project, we did achieve our prerequisite, and then we achieved 3 credits for credit 3. And then you'll take this information and then you'll input that onto the online credit template. And since we formatted this accordingly to that template, it's almost like a one-to-one transfer. You just take information from this cell and put it into that cell. When LEED that credit template is going to do these calculations for you as well. So you definitely want to make sure that you double check, just cross-reference the two. Yes.
So we have a sense where you're storing the information about the user group per fixture.
Wait, I'm sorry.
The information of which user group it is, you store this per fixture, not by room or area.
No, it's per fixture. You're scheduling the fixtures for this.
Does it create like a higher level of human error possibilities where they just put the wrong fixture?
Of course.
Is it possible to maybe associate that information with the room or the area and then set all it off there?
Well, then you have to create a room schedule because you can't mix that into one Revit schedule. But either way, you're inputting it. I'm sorry. Either way, you're inputting it, right? So I don't know how that alleviates the user error because either way, you put it either into the family or you put it into the room.
Women's bathroom, right? Then of course you specify that and you know that, and then you know the women associated with that. Yeah, I mean there's always human error, but per fixture, I would be worried that they just take the wrong fixture.
Right. Well, you have your high performance fixtures, and there's type, right? So you could put that information in the type properties. So every time that fixture is placed, it's accounted for. Because the schedule is not pulling out each individual fixture; it's pulling out the fixture user group.
If you're using type settings, not instance settings. So even if it's a large building with thousands of fixtures, you may have just a handful of types that you can quickly validate the settings.
Right. Exactly. Who said that? Thank you. Behind the column.
Amy, would you check the online questions if anyone asked anything?
Oh yeah, I keep forgetting. Sorry. No, I think the last question is, can you hear me? That's the one that you wrote, though, right?
I'm wondering if I have it set up right. Usually we have 2 or 3 questions. Don't worry about it. Just keep going. I'll figure it out next week.
It would show up in the chat?
Yes.
If there's a, oh, wait, no, never mind. It doesn't show up in the chat. There's actually another thing for questions. Yeah, there are questions. Oh, there's a lot. Yikes. I can't expand it, Robert. It doesn't expand. My apologies to everyone that's on the webinar. Oh, it just says we can't hear you?
This is,
Are you kidding?
no, I'm not sure. This is definitely working.
Oh, no, they can, because how would the heat island example work?
Yeah, they can hear us. They're asking these questions. Drag, I think
I
this,
can't drag it. It won't let me.
this line right here, this dash line, right there. Drag that down. No, don't
Here,
pick.
you do it.
Okay. We can hear you. Repeat
Yeah.
the question, please. Okay, so
Okay.
just
Oh,
that one.
Okay, so there was a question. It says, how would the heat island effect example work when you are linking the model? Do you need to copy monitor? If so, don't you lose shape edited floors? That's a really good question. You are going to find, and I will talk about this a little bit, there are going to be some cases because of the limitations between scheduling information across linked models with Revit, you are going to have, in some cases, to have to copy over some elements or copy monitor some of the elements, and like this person said, you do lose shape edited floors. So in that case, you would probably want to copy those elements, and that's one of the downsides of working across linked models. If Autodesk can work out that function and make it so that you can schedule and be able to access and then do some calculated values across elements that are in different linked models, that would be great. But right now, that's one of the limitations.
Also, I mean, I don't know, this is a general workflow. Have you found things like, say, walls and fixtures versus floor hosted fixtures versus space-based fixtures? Because, like, if an architect does a redesign and decides to rebuild a bathroom with each wall, basically on the engineering side of things, you lose all of your hosted elements. And, have you guys run into any issues with that with regard to the fact that on the engineering side, you basically have to rebuild a bunch of things because the architect deleted a wall and therefore you lost all your fixtures?
You should be losing them. In Revit, what will happen is they'll get orphaned. They're still there. They just don't have their host any longer.
Even wall-based?
Even wall-based. So if
You lost
the wall,
lights off
often what
the
happens
ceiling
is
floor.
the design team will delete a wall and rebuild it.
Right.
There's a new wall there. They
You have
rebuild it in years.
Yeah.
But all the fixtures that were hosted on the wall are orphaned. They're still in the model, but they're not.
But they need to be reassociated.
Yeah. So look up orphaned, I think is the term, and there's another term in Revit in the help, and I'll explain how to reassociate them.
Thanks, Robert.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to get into the last example. All right, so this one's looking at the daylighting and views. And what this credit is looking for is to provide the occupants a connection to the outdoor environment by introducing daylight, and then having all of the regularly occupied, or a certain percentage of the regularly occupied spaces access to views, to the outside world. So submittal there are 2 separate credits. The submittal for the daylight one is 75% of all the occupied spaces has to have natural daylight. And then the submittal for the views is that you want to submit some floor plans that show the line of sight from the interior spaces through to the exterior windows. I'm going to take it so far as doing some of the optimization from Grasshopper and then pushing that information into Revit. Once you're in Revit, then you can create your floor plans. There are a few other things that you need to do for these credits, like you have to designate the T-vis, the glazing, and there's something else that you need to do. But I'm not going to show you all of that because then that just kind of gets kind of mundane. You guys know how to set up some plans and stuff in AutoCAD. In Revit. What did I say? Whoopsie. Oh, man.
Walk around.
Seriously. Where am I? All right, so what this is doing is looking at the location and dimensions of the exterior louvers for optimal shading. These sliders over here are adjusting the two variables that we've set, which are the depth and the angle of each fin. We've chosen to keep the number of fins as a constant, but you can always still make that one of your variables. And then we also, set the position of the sun based on where in the world this project's located. So latitude, longitude, the specified date and time that we want to study. And then over here, we're defining fitness, which is going to be determined by the percentage exposure of the window to the sun. So the lower the number, the better the fitness, right? Where is it in the video? So we'll use Galapagos, which is an evolutionary solver, which will give us the best possible solutions for the test that we've designed. So it's going to run a genetic algorithm, and it starts with an initial population and then looks at different solutions. And then with each generation, it's going to weed out the ones that are not the most optimal. And then the ones that survive, it mates them to come to the best possible solution. So I'll let this run. And then you can see that the sliders are moving automatically. They're adjusting as it's running. And over in that bottom corner, you can kind of see that the population is going to decrease with every generation. So I'll just let it run a little bit.
It's kind of like a goal seeker.
Mm-hmm.
What is the goal you're inputting?
Yeah, so I'm just going to wait for the video to catch up to, I guess, where I want to see. But I'll show you. So we want it to be based on a certain percentage of exposure. So the best solutions are kind of listed there. I don't know if it's at that point. So it's going to report out the best angle and dimensions of the fin, which here it's 122 degrees and 1.4 feet based on that percentage of exposure. So then we can go back into Revit, and we create these exterior shading families where we can then adjust the parameters of the variables that we set, right? So we can select the actual shading family and go into its type properties. And here we can input that information. You can export stuff. You can export, I think somebody asked this question earlier, but you can export from Grasshopper to Excel and then push out information into Revit. There's also a Grasshopper to Revit link that we've worked out at HOK that we've developed. Here we're just showing it manually, where you can just go and type into the two parameter values. And since these are type properties, then all of the changes are going to propagate throughout the entire face of the facade for that orientation, right? Because it was a percent that we wanted based on that specific orientation. And then from here, we can then create the floor plans and the elevations that are necessary for LEED submittal. Like I said, there are a few other things that you need to do. You have to specify the T-vis of all the glazing, and you have to do some illuminance studies of the ground plane for LEED as well. I'm just not going to show all that just because it gets to be too long. All right, so I'm just going to wrap this up. So really, you can see that this is a process, right? To recap everything, basically in Revit, you'll have your template files, and you'll create, your parameters, your schedules, your families, all that custom content that you need in order to make this a repeatable process. In some of the cases, you can take information directly from Revit and push it up to the online system, but you still have to print this out, like to a PDF or something, and you still have to go to the LEED online system and then manually upload it. So there's still a little bit of a disconnect. And then, Revit's only going to get you so far with the calculations, so in some of the cases you're going to have to export to Excel. You also can look at other tools to help you optimize and then simulate and analyze your design. And then you take all that and then you upload all of that to the LEED online system. But, I hope that I kind of demonstrated it, but this process is pretty fragmented, right? It's not that smooth. It's not that streamlined of a workflow. It uses multiple tools, and there's a great deal of management that goes into this. One thing I would love for the scheduling in Revit to be more robust, so that you don't have to cross-reference, so that you can cross-reference schedules and you don't have to get all this information from Revit, and then you don't have to rely so much on Excel in order to do all of this computing. I mean, also the LEED online system, that's not great and without fault either. It's pretty clunky. You know, it is. It's, you know, I mean, everything has to be done on that dashboard. You know, you don't download the files and fill them out and look at them and review them. You have to just do them literally on the site. And, you know, while it's great that everyone can access it, and that's what this big selling point of the whole dashboard system, they're like, oh, everyone on your team can go online. But you know what? Get more than one person on that system at the same time, and it's incredibly slow. It's like just 2 people on it, and you're like, oh, God. There's a lot of compatibility issues with Adobe and Internet Explorer, believe it or not, Internet Explorer. And Adobe, you have to have a specific version of Adobe. You can't have a more current version. I had to like roll back my version of Adobe. It's like 10.1.1 is the only one that it accepts, and like, you know, their support is almost non-existent. Like, don't even call them for support. You're going to be on hold for like half a day, and you'll have Muzak stuck in your head for like 2 more days. It's ridiculous. I think there's like 2 people. I joke, it's like that Visa commercial. Hello, this is Peggy. How may I help you? Like, I think that's the USGBC. Yeah, I'm gonna punch somebody. And you also on the system, you can't readily see the information that's been uploaded. So every time, if you're dealing with a consultant and they had to send some information, if you're doing the management, you can't just see if they've uploaded it. You have to like dig into the layers of each credit requirement to see if that information is even there. It's kind of clunky. There are other things out there, like there's a management system called Lorax Pro, and there's probably others out there too that help you that claim to help you manage the online system with LEED. I've seen demonstrations with Lorax Pro, and to be honest, I don't really see what it does that the online system and Newforma don't do, right? Plus, I think it's really incredibly expensive. Sorry if there's anyone here from Lorax Pro. Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that was the punchline. Crap, I just went there. So all this complaining, what do I want? This is what I want. I want there to be a little icon in Revit or some sort of function within Revit that automatically sends the information to LEED Online, right? I mean, all this transferring of information from one platform to another and then re-entering it to Excel or something else or back into Revit and then re-entering into the online system, I mean, there's a lot of room for error, right? And then not to mention the amount of time that it takes to get all this stuff done. I would love there to be like some sort of function in Revit and I don't know, whatever it's called, like publish to Revit, where it just takes this information and then it can push it right onto the online system. It could run all the calculations. Like the online system has all the calculators built in, right? It just needs the inputs. It does the calculations. The reason we have to rebuild the calculations in Excel were really so we can double check them ourselves to make sure that we're getting the right stuff so we don't have to keep going to the online system and checking our values. All the views that live in your Revit model that are needed as supporting documentation, they can be pushed right into the online system instead of having to. Currently what you have to do is you have to create a PDF, you have to print to PDF, save it somewhere, then go to the online system, and then push it up to the online system. I'd like to be able to review the information before I hit first submittal. So, if you publish to LEED, then you look at LEED and you look at the stuff, you make sure everything's there, you make sure everything adds up, and then you could hit, submit for approval. That would be, I think, an ideal scenario. And then I think we can say we can do LEED calculations from Revit. I don't know if it's can afford it, but you know what? You can tell Autodesk I would tell them to work with the USGBC in order to get this going. And I don't know, maybe somebody out there can develop it.
Definitely sounds like a spot for opportunity for various groups and individuals out there using the programming interface.
I know.
On exposing the innards of Revit to the programming interface. You see all these great tools coming out. Definitely looks like one of the areas that could be exploited.
Yeah. I know what needs to be done. I just don't know how to do it. That's pretty much it. So that's it. Any questions? Good luck with the rest of your night.
think it's good. The color schemes. There's no way to apply them to different smart ones.
No, you can't push them from the template. No, you can transfer project standards, color schemes, transfer project standards.
So they can do it from like one software to another software.
I'm sorry? Wait, you can't take
The same file. Let's say you created a color scheme on one store. We're gonna go to
Oh
the
yeah,
next
no,
store.
you have to recreate it. It's such a limitation, Revit. It's such a pain. I know. That's a limitation. That's
And
just
actually
Revit.
you might head against the wall.
I know.
Like I said.
Yeah. No, you can't do that. It doesn't have. That's just Revit. You can't do it.
Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome.
And the pictures, the cameras, at some point you have to swap them out, right? If you're using Excel,
Well, if I take a special family, I add the shared parameter that I need to. Because you need to create some shared parameters of your own. So when you have you take a family off the internet, you're going to want to push some parameters into it that you've created yourself.
but then what I'm saying is, you keep those cameras until
Oh, you want to stop recording? Sorry.